As a partner in the innovation consulting firm 21ID, Abhimanyu has mentored corporates in innovation and design thinking to drive strategy. He holds a master's program in strategic design and has worked as a strategic design consultant in Milan. The next person here is Roshni, who's a very, very dear friend of mine. Roshni is the organizer-in-chief, which is her cool way of saying chief operating officer, and co-founder of Launchspace. She strives to create value through learning experiences and skills that transcend disciplines. She is the architect behind Launchspace's experiences for learning, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Roshni has formulated and taught workshops on entrepreneurship, design thinking, innovation, and creativity to academic institutions and corporates, which is incidentally where I met her. As a partner at 21ID, she has strategized and applied design thinking to solve education challenges. She credits her background in architecture for enabling her to carve her niche at the intersection of design and education. Launchspace itself is this fascinating new hybrid platform for students to learn innovation and entrepreneurship through a combination of learning and on-ground experiences. So I think it's very safe to assume that you're in excellent hands today. Please make the most of today's workshop, this webinar, and remember that you have to follow your usual rules, where if you have questions, please put them in the comments. Do not interrupt the speakers while they're presenting, right? Please make sure you're making the most of this. Thank you. Over to you, Roshni and Abhimanyu.
Great. Thanks, Kriti.
Thanks, Kriti. I just want to check if everyone can see my screen, and I would like if you can just say hello or something in the chat so I know that I can read your messages. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So what we'll try to do throughout this session is we've tried to make it very interactive. We understand that if this was done in person, you guys would have laughed a little more and been more engaged. We've tried to keep the same level of engagement. So we will pause at some intervals. We will ask you questions, which please feel free to reply to them in the chat. And throughout the session, I don't think you will need to unmute yourself to say something. We will have questions formally at the end. But other than that, if at any point in time we ask a question, you can simply raise your hand to show whether you agree or disagree with what we're saying, or you can put it in, you can say a yes or a no in the chat. So just be very, use chat freely. We would love to keep hearing from you what you think. Yeah, over to Roshni.
Great. Thanks, Abhi. Thank you, Kriti, for that introduction. I was actually going to introduce myself, but I think Kriti's done a great job of introducing the two of us. Also, apologies for not being able to turn my video on. I'm based in Jammu and I have a very terrible internet connection. So please bear with me for that. All right. So like Kriti said, my name is Roshni. I have a background in design, as Kriti pointed out. I studied architecture, and post which I studied education formally. So that's where my degrees, those are the fields where my degrees lie. I'm very interested in working at the intersection of design, education, and entrepreneurship, which is why Abhi and I got together to start Launchspace. So this is a very special project for the two of us. Over to Abhi so he can just talk about himself and then we'll dive right in.
Yes, thanks, Roshni. So Kriti already told you what I've studied, what I'm doing. So I have a master's in design. I was formally introduced to design in 2016, which is probably later than most of you who are attending this webinar. Before that, in a previous life, I studied mathematics. I went to St. Stephen's College, Delhi. I have a bachelor's in maths, and I went on to do a diploma in product design, and then I went on to do my master's in strategic design. Throughout my education, I was very keen in understanding how design can help shape experiences and how you can apply design beyond just the design of objects to the design of experiences and businesses. And I think that's exactly where we are now with Launchspace. We're building a company that teaches people how to design their own businesses. And we love designers because of the superpowers that they have that we will talk to you about. And we'll tell you what are some other skills that you would, you should pick up. So we asked you to fill this out. Roshni had some interesting things to say about this.
All right, so this is where we're going to, so I'm going to be asking a couple of questions. It would be great if everyone can quickly respond on chat, just so that we know that you're listening. So we asked you three actually, but two questions were, what in 3 words does design mean to you, right? And what we've done is we've created this word cloud based on everybody's responses. So we had about 42 responses, and this is the density of words that we've received. It's interesting to see. So can anyone point out the most common words? If you could just quickly put them in your chat. What were the common responses that we've received based on this word cloud? So as you can see, there is, there's creative, there's innovative. Yes, thank you. Sharon says creativity, great. Yes, there's function, there's innovation. So I don't think people sat together and discussed this, right? But everyone still had very similar words that were coming in, very similar descriptions of what design means to you. And moving on, we also asked you what were the skills that are most important to be successful entrepreneurs. And over here, the most prominent word that featured over and over again in everyone's response was leadership, which is very interesting. Also, there is confidence, there's planning, there's marketing skills, consistency. So we wanted to point out something really interesting, which is why we made you this exercise. So we put these two together. Can anyone notice the parallels between these two word clouds? So one is the skills that you need for entrepreneurship. The other one is your definition of what design means to you. Anyone? Do you see any? Okay. So there's someone that says creativity. Yes. Anything else? What are the common threads between these two? Of course. Okay. Function. Great. All right. So that brings me to an interesting parallel that I like to draw. I do this a lot, even when teaching, architectural design, while teaching interior design. And it's great that we have a lot of aspiring designers here, because I know that you will relate to this. So to the left, we have something that is known as the Vitruvian triad. Does anyone know who Vitruvius is? I'm sure you've heard about Vitruvius in your design theory lessons. So Vitruvius was a Roman architect, and he came up with the 3 cornerstones of great design, right? So he called them beauty, utility, and stability. So in Latin, that would be firmitas, utilitas, and venustas. Now, the interesting thing is, when you look at entrepreneurship, there are, again, 3 cornerstones, as we call them, of viability, desirability, and feasibility. And the sweet spot right there in the middle is where innovation happens. So that's where the magic happens, right? So this is interesting. So what we like to talk about today is, what are the skills that you need to be a successful entrepreneur, right? And we'd like to talk about the myths, and also can everyone recognize the 4 characters that you see on the screen? Really well known. Very quickly, if you can just put down 4 names, whom do you recognize?
Try going from left to right, the characters that you recognize.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so we have Jobs, we have Musk. Who else? Who's the guy with the yellow beard? Okay. So when we talk about these characters, so the reason we put these out here is because each of these guys represent a set of skills, right? And these are key skills that are really important in your entrepreneurial journey. And we think, according to us at Launchspace, we say that every person has a personal journey that you go through, and we need to have each of these skills, right? Because you're probably going to be running your startup by yourself or with another partner. So you guys need to have each of these skills to be able to run a startup successfully. So when we talk about journeys, the first thing that we like to say is entrepreneurship is hard. Whoever thinks that it's glamorous, whoever said that it's all about cool titles, you get to call yourself CEO, that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. I mean, there's a reason why we've all heard about those 4 people on the screen. But what about the hundreds and the thousands of people who fail? Nobody hears about them, right? So this cartoon over here points out to something that is known as the survivorship bias, which is that we only hear about maybe the 1%, or maybe even the 1% of the 1% of people who make it. But no one ever talks about the failures. No one ever talks about the struggle, right? And today we just like to throw a little bit of light on that, because we feel that that's really important when you think about entrepreneurship as a choice, because you have to know that it's hard. It is not a bed of roses. So moving on. Has anyone seen this very famous, so this is a diagram that has been used a lot in the business circles by someone called Simon Sinek. And this little diagram is a great place to start if you are thinking about starting your own venture. And we always say that whenever you start something, start in the middle right there. That little why, that's where you start. So you start with the why and you go outwards. A lot of us say, I have a great idea. I want to build it. Why do you want to build it? Right? You know what you want to do. You know how you're going to build it. But if you don't know why you want to do it, you're missing something there. So that's a very important part of the puzzle.
Yes. If you take the example of Uber, when Uber started out, they had a very grand vision. They wanted to change the way transportation happened across the world. They had a very big vision there. Why was because they wanted to transform how people moved. The why that Launchspace had was hopefully to not to put down colleges or universities, but to have people learn for themselves, was because we understood that education is something that other people do to you, and learning is something that you do for yourself. And if you wanted to have a fulfilling life or career where you made progress, where you were happy, you would have to learn the skills of innovation and entrepreneurship, be able to think for yourself, build companies for yourself. And hopefully, we'll have a future where the lecture halls are empty because everyone is out there doing something and learning on the outside, in the outside world. So the benefit of, I think, it's very important that all of you on today are designers of one form or the other. One of the best things that you learn as a designer is the design process. You will know that a lot of companies fail, a lot of companies shut shop because they end up building products that nobody wants, because most of them start off at the ideate. They start off right in the middle, right? They start off with an idea and they try to build the idea instead of starting all the way from point A, which is the discovery and the define phase. The benefit you have as designers is that you've been through this cycle so many times that you can easily look around yourself, identify problems and start defining them, and then move on to coming up with ideas. This aligns with your start with the why. So you need to have a why, you need to have a problem that you're solving. I've found that the easiest way to define a problem that you want to solve is by using this formula. I studied math. I like maths a little bit. I know as designers, most people run away from mathematics. That's perfectly fine. I promise you, this is the only X, Y, and Z you will see today. So the formula is pretty simple. It says people belonging to a group X have a need or problem Y that can be solved by a solution Z. So if you're able to define, when you start out, if you're able to define who are these people that you're solving the problem for, what is the problem that you're solving for them, and how are you solving it for them, that is the solution Z. If you have these three, you're on the path to building a company. You're halfway there. So the first component of the XYZ formula is, of course, the problem, identifying people that have a problem. Now, as designers, we try to solve problems around us. We are very good at observing. We're very curious. We observe things around us. I take the liberty of calling myself a designer. I'm sorry if it offends anyone. I don't have a bachelor's. I haven't been through formal design school training, but I have a couple of degrees, and sometimes I like to throw my weight around that. But I'm going to say we designers throughout this talk. So the advantage that we designers have when we're trying to solve problems is that we're very curious. We can observe what happens around us, and we have a perception of the world that far exceeds what most other normal people, non-designer people have. So use that to your advantage and use that to identify what we call good problems. Now, a good problem has several characteristics. The first one is that it is popular. A lot of people have this problem across the world. If you take Uber's example, transportation is a problem that almost everyone has. Everyone needs to get somewhere. It is a problem that grows. The more people there are, the more traffic that is, the more people need the more people need this problem solved for themselves. It is an urgent problem. When you need an Uber, you definitely need an Uber right then. You're not going to book an Uber for yourself 6 months in advance. So the problem is being solved that is being solved is urgent. Uh, Try to solve problems, the solutions to which are currently very expensive. If you can find a way of solving a problem that is 10 times cheaper, if your solution is twice, half the price or 1/10 of the price of the current solution, you're on your way to building something very interesting. And finally, find a problem that is frequent. If you are if you start a company that does marriage photography, yes, a lot of people get married. That happens frequently. But in any person's life, that happens only once, hopefully, unless you go through, unfortunately, a couple of bad marriages. That is not a frequent problem. So find problems that are frequent, that people need solved for themselves on a daily basis. This guy is obviously the man with the big eye and the small eye, Mr. Jeff Bezos, the face of capitalism today, one of the world's richest men. When he was asked what problems Amazon solves, he started Amazon way back in 1995. Okay, so probably older than many of you on this call. I beat Amazon by only 3 years, so I know how old this company is. He started out by solving two problems that he thought were very important. He said, I want to deliver products fast and I want to deliver them cheap. Okay, two things, cheap and fast. And the best part about that, the problems that he picked, was that these problems would not change in 10 years. Many people say, what is going to change in 10 years? What will the future look like? I propose to you, the more interesting question to ask is, what is not going to change in 10 years? In 10 years, people are not going to come to Jeff Bezos and say, Jeff, I love Amazon, but can you deliver your products a little slower? I don't like that it shows up the next day, right? Or they're not going to say, Jeff, I love Amazon, but your products are too cheap. Can you make them more expensive? So when you identify problems, try to keep this 10-year view in mind. You need to have the first skill, that is to have a long-term focus. Now, startups equal growth. We all know this. When we start a small business, the difference between a business and a startup is that a startup is slated to grow 100 or even 1000x in a few years. So you have to be prepared for that kind of growth. And you need to have a vision the moment you set out. Quickly, I'd like to take this question to the chat. What do you think Uber started out as? What do you think was the problem that they wanted to solve right in the beginning? What was Uber's vision? If people can just put something in the chat, what do you think Uber's vision was when it started? Anyone in the chat? Think about the answer. Uber started out with a vision to transform transportation, safe traveling. Thank you, Shivani. Safe traveling, self-driving vehicles would take them wherever they needed to go. So Uber, back in 2009 or 10 when they started, they had a vision for their company that far exceeded what they were able to do at the time. So they were able to think big and think of scale. In fact, this is a very interesting question. How many cars do you think Uber started out with? How many cars, numbers of cars do you think Uber started out with? There is obviously a right answer. Okay, 0 is a very good answer, Shubham. I really like it, but think of a natural number that's greater than 0. How many cars do you think Uber started out with? Was it 10,000 cars? I don't think so. Was it 1,000 cars? Okay, Sharon says 10, very close. Was it 100 cars? 20, Shivani? The right answer is that they started out with just 3 cars. 5, Asha was the closest. I don't know if you saw it first, or anyway, I'll give it to you. So Asha said 5, that's the closest that we are to 3. That is the right answer. They started out in Manhattan, Manhattan in New York. They had just 3 cars and they tested their idea to understand if this would be a success. And from there, they have grown to probably millions of taxi cabs that they have across the world. So Uber is now the largest taxi company in the world. So start small. Don't be intimidated by where you want to be. Make sure you have a large vision. So that is the problem. The other piece is the solution. Once you identified a good problem, you also need to have a very good solution for this problem. But a good solution need not take a lot of time. Again, another question for the chat. How long do you think it took to build the first prototype of Google Glass? The first prototype that allowed the creators of Google Glass to test whether Google Glass would work. How much time do you think it took? It could be weeks, months, days, anything. I would love to see your answers in the chat. if we were doing this session in person, I would throw you a little Launchspace badge if you got the right answer. But unfortunately, I can't throw anything. I'd probably break my camera. So there are
I
no
think
prizes
people
for
are
the right
trying
answer.
to use Google. I mean, they're trying to use Google to Google this.
Feel free to Google it. But 1 year, Asha says 1 year, Pranali says 1 year. Think lesser. Do you think it was 2 weeks? Okay, Tamanna, good. Not 2 weeks. Little less than 2 weeks. Do you think it was 2 days? I'm sure you're all getting very tense now. You know, we went from a year to 2 days. The right answer, 1 day, Sharon. Very good. Sharon is very close again. 10 days. The right answer is that it took them just 90 minutes to build the first prototype. Exactly. I know. I had the same look on my face when I watched the TED Talk. This is what the first Google Glass looked like. Just like they say, Rome wasn't built in a day, but Google Glass's first prototype was built in less than a day, in just 90 minutes. 1.5 hours, they connected a netbook to a tiny projector, and they used a sheet protector to see if they could project information. And that was the first prototype. They said, hey, the only thing first we have to test is, can we display information on a screen that is not a physical screen, that is a transparent screen? And they were able to prototype in just 90 minutes. So as designers, again, I'm calling myself a designer, we are obsessed with finding the perfect solution. I would say to you, I would suggest, don't look for perfect solutions, look for solutions that solve the problem and then work around perfecting them. Don't try to build something excellent, something amazing that you're proud of. Many people, there's an author, Reid Hoffman, who was one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, also the author of this book called Blitzscaling. He says, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. So put something out that embarrasses you. As designers, I know that your ego is always associated with what you're building. So don't do that. Build something, put it out there, test, and iterate from there. The last thing that you need to have after the problem and the solution is that you need to have a set of very unique insights. And this is the skills that are required to do this. I think all of you already have. You have creativity. You can imagine out of the box solutions. You have insights that most people would miss. And you're able to ideate within boundaries. Like the first prototype for Google Glass did not take $1,000. It was built with less than $150. Try to build something cheap and fast and ideate within boundaries. Don't depend on a lot of money to test your solution, you know. And to wrap up this bit, the solution bit, how many of you I know many of you recognize the guy on the left. He's probably, you have a poster of him on one of your walls or on your laptop if you have a Mac. Who's the guy on the right? Do you recognize the guy on the right? Anyone in chat? Do you want to guess who this guy is? The black and white, perfect, Kushagra. Awesome. He is Henry Ford. So Henry Ford and Steve Jobs were innovators of their time. They've gone down in history as some of the most prolific innovators. But they said the same thing about one particular aspect, which is customer research. Steve Jobs said that he would rather not listen to customers. He would give them what they wanted. Henry Ford said, if I asked people what they wanted, this is apparently what he said. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So he invented the car, obviously. But if he had asked people, what do you want? They would have said probably that we want our horses to go faster. So as designers, you also need to be able to understand what the market needs, not what the market is explicitly asking for. So these are the set of skills that you need to have as a pioneering designer. So before I hand over to Roshni, I want to just emphasize on this one point that when you start working, when you start building your startup, you will have to do both smart work as well as hard work. You cannot rely just on smart work and say, hey, the hard work is going to take care of itself. Which means on a continuous basis, you have to be willing to do the grunt work, the dirty work. If you're talking about design, it is producing that one post every single day, using your template, publishing, writing something every day, doing something that takes effort on a daily basis. Before you delegate it to someone else, you need to learn how to do it yourself. So never give up on doing the grunt work. Roshni?
All right, so this brings us to the next bit. How do you talk about yourself? So this is an open question. How many of you would go out there, when you meet somebody and you say, hello, I'm, Roshni, I am a product designer, graphic designer, textile designer. How many of you, so can we have a show of hands? How many of you would define yourselves as your degree or okay. Shivani says she would. Okay, great. Anyone else? All right, Sharon, thank you. Okay, so what I'd like to point out here is when you put a label to what you do, right? You are not really defining who you are. You're only defining what you do. And that can be a little bit dangerous because sometimes it might be limiting. For example, if I met Abhi at a conference, right? I've never met him before. I walk up to him and I say, hello, I'm Roshni. Who are you? What do you think he would say?
So I would have two ways of introducing myself. I could say, hi, Roshni. I'm a strategic designer and a mathematician. I'm working as part of Launchspace. Or I could say, I'm building Launchspace, a platform to teach innovation and entrepreneurship. Now, the difference between the two is what I do is very different from who I am and what I've studied. The moment you introduce yourself as a product designer, you do two things. You limit what they think of you because they have a stereotype of product designers in their head, and you limit how you look at yourself, because if you say can a product designer can an architect start an education company? I don't think so, but Roshni is doing it because she does not call herself explicitly an architect. She's just someone who studied architecture. That is not her identity. Rumi, the very famous philosopher, said something to this effect. He said, I was clever, I wanted to change the world. Today I want to change myself. So this brings us to the very important aspect of not limiting yourself to the skills that you have today. It is to be willing to learn, to be willing to have this agility to keep learning something new every day. If you call yourself a product designer, you will not learn marketing, you will not learn sales. But if you're someone who studied design, you can also become someone who studied design and marketing and sales and HR and legal and all of those things. And that is what Roshni and I have had to do over our journey over the past couple of years. We've had to learn a bunch of stuff. I did not know about anything about the legal aspect of startups. And now, because of my work here, I've had to do that. Yes, Roshni?
So interesting question again. How many of you think that it's a lot of fun being an entrepreneur? You are accountable to no one. You set your own deadlines. You don't have a boss. Nobody's asking you what you're doing. You call the shots. Does it sound like fun? Can we have a show of hands? Does this sound like a lot of fun? Okay, Cheryl says no. All right.
But this is true, right? As an entrepreneur, you are accountable to no one. Isn't that true?
No one's telling you what to do, right? Okay, it's a lot of responsibility. Great. No one's telling you what to do. You decide when you want to do something. You decide when you want to do it, how you want to do it, why you want to do it even. It's better than working 9 to 5, isn't it? I mean, no one's sitting on your head. You don't have a manager. Because we have our own set of deadlines. Thank you for pointing that out. That's amazing. I'm glad people are saying this because there is a lot of great. Thank you. Yes, that big red cross right there sort of drives the point home. Yes, there is a lot of misconception about what it's like being an entrepreneur. I feel like in the media, especially, it's like we said, survivorship bias, right? Yes, you're accountable to your clients. Thank you. All right. So that's the thing. So everyone talks about how awesome it is. It's a great lifestyle. You're building something new. It's exciting. It's definitely all of those things. But like you pointed out, you are accountable to the single most important person, that is yourself. And in order to be able to do this successfully, you need to have the skill of setting clear goals and being able to prioritize. Because if you don't do these two things, you are not really going to make it very far.
Right.
All right.
As many people have pointed out, Roshni, I'm also seeing you're accountable to our clients. That's exactly, that's the point that we're trying to drive home. You're accountable to yourself, your clients, your employees, your team of co-founders. In fact, as an entrepreneur, you are probably accountable to more people than you are probably as accountable as a mother is to, keeping in the patriarchal society, holding the family together, smash patriarchy. So that allows us to, now that you've come up with interesting ideas, you've learned to do the hard work, how do you put your hard work out there? As designers, all of you know the importance of influence, the importance of producing impact by putting your work out there, right? If you do not talk about what you're doing, you are very unlikely going to get very far. So the most important skill that many entrepreneurs have is this ability to influence without authority. if you are an entrepreneur, nobody owes you anything. Nobody needs to listen to you. You are not a Ratan Tata. You are not a Mukesh Ambani. Nobody will stand up and say, Namaskar Saab, when you walk into a room. You have to command that authority yourself. And for that, there are a set of other skills that you need to have. They're personified by this man, one of my most favorite, entrepreneur innovators of all time, Steve Jobs. When he walked out onto a stage, I would ask you after this, if you want to watch something entertaining and enlightening, Google Steve Jobs' iPhone keynote address. The first time he announced the iPhone, that speech is mind-blowing. This guy walks onto the stage and everyone is looking at him to hear about what he's going to say. They're hooked, riveted onto his every word. He was able to inspire them. He's able to talk about this product, this iPhone. It's just a tiny metal box in his hand, but the way he talks about it, the way he inspires you as to what you can do with it, the fact that you can transform your life with it, that is unmatched, that very few people can do. But as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to do that. You need to make your customers, your investors, your partners dream about what they can do if they partner with you. So the other thing that I see a lot of designers, we're very shy about networking. Networking is for those that annoying girl who posts 25 selfies every day on Instagram. Her stories have all these tiny, tiny little dots. Those are the people you think network, but that's not true. I know I don't seem annoying. I'm not. I started out in 2018 with about 150 connections. Today on LinkedIn, just by virtue of creating value, sharing value with people, I have probably 6,900, about 7,000 connections with, that people that interact with me, maybe not on a regular basis, that see and the work that I put out and see my ideas. So the ability to approach strangers is one of the most important abilities that you need to have as a designer, because we're so caught up with our work. Sometimes we don't even want to share it with the outside world because we're worried what people might think, or we're worried that they might not approve. And that brings me to the next point, the most important thing that I have found value in. Only yesterday, I spent 20 minutes on a call with one of our mentors. And in those 20 minutes, the wisdom that he gave me, because of his 35 years of experience, that surpasses even 3 months of effort and independent thinking that I would have to do to arrive at the same insights. And I would probably never arrive there. So be very willing, be very comfortable with asking for help, knowing that you may not be able to give back to the people the same level of things that you get from them. So as an entrepreneur, be a little, I would say, fearless, shameless in asking for help, knowing that you will not be able to give it back to them. Find the last point, I think Roshni is going to talk about this, find co-founders with complementary skill sets. So startups fail, Rosh, before I hand over to you, the last point about this is startups fail all the time. Startups fail mostly because they build products that nobody needs. Now, as a designer, you know that the most important thing is to gauge the viability and the feasibility and the desirability of a product. So when things start going tough, what do you do? Roshni to the rescue.
All right. So we've heard this before, right? When the going gets tough, the tough get going. People sing about it. It's all over the place. But this is really important because this teaches you the skill of resilience, right? What is resilience? Why is it important? Anyone? Why do we need to be resilient to be successful? Well, when you start building your startup, right, things are going to get hard, like we pointed out before, and you will need to be prepared for failure. So that brings us to, everyone knows of Pixar, right? Who created this? Any guesses?
Can you name
one
of the co-founders? Yeah, one of the co-founders of Pixar.
Everyone knows what Pixar is, right? We've all watched,
movies.
Our childhood. Okay, well, but who, can you name one of the co-founders, Sharon? Any idea? Wild guess. Oh, are you saying Disney? All right, thank you, Asha. Well, yes, you're right. If you think that having a plan B is stupid, well, you should ask Steve Jobs, because if you've heard, has anyone heard, everyone knows what the iPhone is. We all know what the iPad is, but we've never heard about the Apple I or the Apple Lisa or all of those crazy things that Jobs used to work on. And I mean, he almost got kicked out of his own company, right? And at that point in time, he said, you know what, I'm just going to go out there and make something else for myself, and I will come back and reclaim this company. And that was his plan B. So he co-founded Pixar and eventually made it back to Apple to lead it. So you should definitely, I would recommend reading, Jobs' story, because it's quite the read. He was not the nicest person, yes, I will agree, but there is a lot to learn about how he ran his business. So moving on, having a plan B, yes, that is. All right, so this guy, I noticed that people pointed out in our set of 4 characters, people pointed out Jobs, they pointed out Musk. Nobody said anything about this man here. Any idea who he is? Great, thank you. Jack Ma, absolutely. So Jack Ma has a pretty funny story. Did you know that he was rejected from Harvard about 12, was it? 12 times?
Yes.
Yes, he was rejected from Harvard 12 times. And also at this one point in time, he went to KFC to try and get a job. And out of 60 candidates, 59 of them were selected. Jack Ma wasn't one of them. So this guy with hilarious stories was absolutely open to being rejected. He didn't care about differing opinions, and he went on to build Alibaba.com, right? Because this guy probably learned from his mistakes. It didn't matter no matter how hard they pushed him down, no matter how many times he was rejected, he was open to it, and that led him to build Alibaba.com. And this, of course, is the person you see on the screen. This is Abhi at one of our workshops. And this was when we just started off with Launchspace. We were running workshops. And when we started Launchspace, we said, okay, we're going to run workshops, teach them design thinking, teach them innovation. And then we slowly evolved to a faculty workshop model. Then we made a curriculum. Then we created an innovation lab. And now we're making a digital platform. So it's been quite the journey for us, right? And the common thread for us here is being very, very agile when making changes. If we sat back and said, we do workshops and that's the only thing we do, we're not going to do anything else, I think we would have probably shut shop months ago. We're not that old, by the way. We are only 8 months old, and we already have about 5 or 6 pivots, I would say. All right, so luck. Everyone likes to talk about luck. How many of you have, said, today's a lucky day, I had great luck today. If I pass this exam, it's because I had good luck. How many of you believe in luck?
Yeah, how important do you think luck is to building a startup? If you fail, you can just say bad luck, right? Who cares?
Well, that's something that we disagree with, because yes, thank you. It's not really, okay, Shivani says, I don't, it's about making the most of the opportunity. Perfect. So when you fail, it's not really about luck, but it is a lack. A lack of what? Okay. A lack of being realistic, a lack of, planning, a lack of, there's so many things, right? A lack of confidence. Thank you. Time management. Perfect. I'm loving this. Anything else? What is it a lack of? Failure. All right. All right, a lack of opportunity. Interesting, but can you make your own opportunities? That's the question. All right, okay. Planning, perfect. Lack of discipline even, in most cases. Perfect.
Yeah, so that's, when we built Launchspace, we said, if we want entrepreneurs, if we want student entrepreneurs especially to be successful, we want them to never experience a lack of any of these things, a lack of positivity, like Cheryl says, planning, like Shreya says. All of these skills are things that you can learn. And that is the central tenet. Thank you, Tamanna. Self-trust, right? So all of these are skills that we believe can be learned. And we created what we call the Launch Readiness Index. This is all the 20 skills that we have talked about, that we have taken you through. If you want to take a screenshot, this is the best time to take a screenshot. These are the skills, and these are the skills by the people that demonstrate them the best. Take a minute, take a screenshot, and then I'll move on. Okay, cool. Just ask your friend to WhatsApp it to you. So the first character that we spoke about in the beginning, the pioneer is the person that we spoke about in the beginning, the person who can think of scale, the person who can think long-term, ideate within boundaries, and understand how to build products that people want. You need to be very pioneering when you're building a startup. The other kind of person that you need to be is the doer, like Elon Musk, who is not shy of working 80 hours in a week. He's not afraid of sleeping on the factory floor if it means getting his Teslas out and delivering them to customers. Yes, he's a little wonky in the head. We know that. He tweets the strangest things. He called his child XAEA12. XI12, I don't know how to pronounce that. I think it's a joke. But that guy, his work ethic is unquestionable. He has built PayPal. He was a part of the PayPal mafia. He's built Tesla. He's built SpaceX. I mean, you'll run out of fingers counting the number of companies this man has built. And all of that has been underlined by his willingness to do the hard work that it takes to get these companies going. The third kind of person that we've spoken about, the set of skills, are of the influencer. The person who's willing to go out there, be shameless, network fearlessly, ask for favors, and inspire people to buy their products and believe in what they're doing. And the final kind of person, like Jack Ma and Jeff Bezos, who's been doing this since '95, is having this locus of control, having this belief in what you're doing, but also being open to taking feedback, not being closed and saying, I know what is best, taking feedback, but not taking criticism in a negative way, and being very resilient and being willing to pivot and change, just similar to what we have been doing at Launchspace. So we built an assessment that allows you to measure where you stand. And, one of our offerings is that we'll speak to Kriti after this, and we'd love for you to take this assessment to understand how ready are you to start your own startup. What are your dominating characteristics? Now, if you're a pioneer doer, you need to improve some characters. You're already good at some things. Most importantly, we can help you identify a co-founder from your set of people. If you are very good at being a pioneer and a doer, we can find you someone who's a striver and an influencer in your own group. So you can co-found a startup with them, and you have all the 20 skills that we've spoken about. And to take it further, to teach you these skills, our platform, a digital platform that we're building, teaches you how to learn these skills of innovation and entrepreneurship by actually doing them as challenges. So our platform is currently under works, but what we've started is a startup school. We've started a cohort. We realized one very important thing with the coming of the coronavirus. A lot of people, especially non-essential people who are called non-essential, are not going to have jobs. Many offers have been taken back. Many companies, many startups that we have been seeing at T-Hub, we're incubated at T-Hub, by the way. We've seen a lot of startups shut down, go home. They don't know what to do. This is possibly the most important time to become a forced entrepreneur, which means don't look for a job, become an entrepreneur, find a problem, try to solve it. And we run a startup school, we have two programs. You can sign up for one of the two programs. One of them is for a week. The other one is more intensive. It's for 2 weeks. You feel free to scan this QR code or visit this link. I can put it in the chat, but we want you to learn how to start your own company, and we'd love to talk to Kriti and see if we can take it forward. And we can have, if many of you are interested, just head over to this form. We'll teach you all the skills that we've spoken about. We'll teach you the basics of starting a company, how to find an idea, how to find a problem statement. And in 1 week, we can get you started with the basics of founding your own startup. And I think this time as designers, you have a huge advantage. You have the home run advantage of having a ton of problems around you. India is a country filled with problems. With coronavirus, there are even more problems. So we'll help you identify these problems, and we'll help you figure out how to build solutions to solve these problems. So feel free, if you're interested, head over to this form, fill up the form. You don't have to pay anything. If enough of you are interested, we'd love to talk to Kriti and make you participate in this as a proper program. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? We can take a couple of questions if we have some time left.
Yeah. Feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions, or Kriti, if there's a better way of doing this, please, please moderate, please take over.
Questions, anyone?
Okay. Shivani has asked a question. How do we create an impact as an entrepreneur? I think your goal when you start out has to be not to create impact, but to produce value. Okay. Try to create value, not impact. If you're able to create value, the most important thing for a startup to aim for in the beginning is what we call, in jargon, it is customer traction. That means you've built a product that is giving value to your customers. Customers like your product. you have a traction with them, they're recommending it to their friends, more people are signing up to use your product, or more people are buying it, there's word of mouth. If you're able to create value for customers, trust me, everything else falls into place. Investors will come running after you to give you money because you're producing value. Even if you're not able to charge money for your product in the beginning, eventually you will be able to monetize it. Don't worry about that. So I would say in the beginning, chase value, not impact, and you will, impact will follow. The very famous ishq dialogue, कि लड़की बस और ट्रेन इन तीनों के पीछे मत भागो, something like that. It's a terrible dialogue, but yeah, don't run after impact, run after hey, Rosh, which is this movie? It's a dialogue from a movie, right? Three Idiots.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, कि success के पीछे मतलब don't run after something, run after something else. Success झक मार के. Yeah, someone wants to share. Cheryl, you want to tell us what the exact dialogue is?
Hi everyone, by the way. Sorry, my video decided to start working now. All right.
Yeah, Cheryl, do you know the dialogue? Do you want to share it? You raise your hand. I think you remember it. Don't run after success. Excellence का पीछा करो. Success झक मार के तुम्हारे पीछे पड़ेगी. Exactly. Same thing here. Impact is success. Excellence is value. So create value. Success will come.
Any other questions? All right.
Okay, good question. How can we separate need from desire? I'll answer it, and then I'd love for Roshni to answer it because she has probably more of a design background than I do. See, when you ask people what they want, they will tell you two things. They will tell you why their existing solutions are not working, and they will tell you what the problem is that they're experiencing. So when you hear these things, don't try to just do the same. They'll say that I've tried doing this, it doesn't work. Don't try to make a better version of that thing that doesn't work. Listen to what they term as the problem. Your need is going to come from that. Many people will express desire. I wish my, people will say, for example, I wish this glass bottle was lighter so I could carry it around. Now that is a desire. They have expressed a desire as an improvement to an existing product. The problem you have to understand, which you can do as designers, the implicit, the unarticulated need is that they want to be able to carry water around them in a way that is portable and that looks good. Like a glass bottle, I believe, looks good. So you reframe the question, and that is where the need emerges. So a desire is what they say, a need is what they're trying to say, but they're not able to say. Rosh, would you like to?
Just add to that. I think it's important to know the difference between a want and a need, because then it really comes down to reinventing the wheel, which is what a lot of companies do. If you just try to add features and features and features just because people keep asking for them, you kind of miss the plot, and that's what happens in most products that fail. Is you miss the problem that you're trying to solve. And it becomes more about how many, wants can I address? How cool can I make my product? How many features can I add to it? It really isn't about that. The best products are the ones that are simple. They're the ones that you don't even realize exist, because simplicity is not easy to achieve. So that is how you I would say it's really about understanding a want versus a need. And that comes from a lot of design research. That comes from a lot of user research. It comes from understanding behaviors. It comes from all of these things. So yeah.
This one other thing that one of our mentors taught us, Rosh probably remembers the hierarchy better. Our mentor told us that there are three kinds of questions. Rosh, do you want to share that?
Right. So he says there are good questions.
There are excellent questions. There are good questions, and there are nice questions. Yeah.
No, so it's good, excellent, and great questions, right? So yeah. So the thing is, there's no such thing as a bad question. The moment you, as a designer, say, I'm not going to ask this question because it's stupid, well, point lost. Because a good question is something that you know the answer to completely, an excellent question is, okay, I know the answer to this, but maybe not so much, like maybe just about halfway. And a great question is something that you know absolutely nothing about, because that is where discovery begins. So yeah, I think this is something we really like to keep talking about. So we keep saying, let's just
please ask questions.
Good questions. Let's ask, great questions. Yeah.
There's no such thing as a bad question. Please ask questions. We're beating around the bush to tell you, ask questions. We're waiting to answer your questions.
Yeah. Yes.
If you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, if you don't want to type it out, feel free. Can anyone, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I think he is also not there.
Okay.
Her internet is acting up. So
No
if
problem.
you guys have a question, please ask.
Or you can always reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to connect. We'd be happy to answer any questions. If you decide, you want to think about what we've said, we've put out a lot of information, I know. So if people would like to go back, think about it, write to us later, we'd be more than happy to connect. I think Abhi will just put our LinkedIn profiles on there. Thank you.
I'm just putting yours.
Yes. Okay, Tamanna. Thank you. All right. So Tamanna's question is, if we as a designer try to create meaningful products, how do we make sure that our users understand the same thing? Interesting. What is it? So first of all, the question would be, what is it that you are trying to make your user understand? Are you trying to make them understand how amazing the product is because you created it? Or are you trying to get them to use it? And that would be question number one, because the classic example is Jobs. Remember what we said about how he said, I'm not going to ask people directly. So I'm not saying this is the best approach, yeah? Because sometimes there are products where you need to go out into the market. You need to speak to people. You cannot always be as pompous as Jobs and say, hey, I know exactly what's going to work, so I will do it, and people will lap it up because they will, But yeah, so Abhi, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so this can be one of two things. If you're having to, so one problem is a marketing problem, the other problem is a design problem. The first problem, the marketing problem, is if you've created a product, but people don't know about it and they don't understand it because they aren't hearing about your product. That you solve through marketing. You learn how to market it. You learn digital marketing. Now that's actually going to become the paradigm. Learn how to put your product in front of people who need it. The second problem about making your users understand is the design problem. Have you made your product simple enough to use and simple enough to understand that it is intuitive? If it is not simple, have you reduced the learning curve that it takes for them to use the product? If it is a complicated application, for example, do you have tutorials in place? If it is a product that is not immediately easy to understand, have you made a book that allows them to understand it? More importantly, are people reading that book when you send it to them? So yes, definitely what Roshni said in the beginning about making things as simple as possible, that is essential. But some things cannot be simplified beyond a certain level. So try to solve it in two ways: market it well and design it better so that it becomes more, it's more user friendly for them to use. I hope that answers your question, Tamanna.
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole part about how do we make sure that users understand the same thing, like I said, it's not really important that they understand your, intention or meaning behind why you make the product, but it's important that they understand the product and they
the
understand
value that it creates for them.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Tamanna. So Shivani has asked, what is the best way to choose the platform as a startup? Shivani, can you tell me what do you mean by the platform? Are you talking about digital versus offline? If you want to ask, if you want to unmute, digital versus offline. Shivani, if you want, you can also unmute and ask the same question. Okay, but I think you've given us enough. I'll start answering it. What is the best way to choose your platform as a startup, digital versus offline? This is again one of the things that as a designer you definitely need to have, is the ability to understand first what is the problem that you're solving. Digital, online, offline, these are all means. As long as you've identified a problem. One second, I'm able to hear my own echo. Someone has unmuted and I can hear myself. Okay, better, fixed. Thank you. So this question comes up a lot later. You should be asking yourself first, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? If you're trying to solve a problem like, I want to help people remember to do things, there are two ways you can solve this problem. You can either make an app for them, or you can make a wearable device that buzzes on their hand. I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas. Before you jump into that, you have to understand, who are you solving the problem for? Are you solving it for senior citizens who don't know how to use their phone? Are you solving it for kids who don't have access to phones? Are you solving it for busy professionals? So go back to the XYZ formula that I had shared. There is a group of people X. Remember, that group of people has to be as small as possible. Many times as a designer or as an innovator, we are tempted to say, my product solves the problem for everyone. Who's your customer? Everyone can be my customer. But that's not true. Even if you pick something like this, this pair of headphones, everyone is not the customer for this. This is a product that is aimed at people who are into gaming, who want to focus or who want to work uninterrupted. As simple as that. If you look at something like this is also the same thing. It is basically a set of earphones. But what it allows you to do is work out, exercise, etc. when you're using this product. So even though these two products are the same platform, they're a wireless noise cancelling earphone or headphone device. The customers, the value, the idea, the why of these products is very different. So don't start with a platform, start with a problem, and let the best platform emerge from research.
I just have something to add to that also. Sometimes a product is not necessarily a tangible thing. It could also be a system, right? And that is where, so like Abhi said, it's not about the tool. So the platform is just the tool. It's the means to the end. You say, okay, this is how I want to get people to use my solution. But sometimes your solution could be a system. It could be an experience even. It doesn't always have to be like something that you can hold, right? Like it could be an intangible product even. So yeah, I think, I hope that answers your question. Okay, Cheryl.
Yeah, before starting a startup, should we think about SWOT analysis? Great question, Cheryl. Before you start your startup, you have to do a lot of research, okay? As a designer, when you're designing a product, you do customer research. As an entrepreneur, when you want to put your product into the market, you have to do market research. Now, market research is of several kinds. There are lots of different tools that you can use. SWOT is a tool that is used for companies that want to understand the strengths that they have, the weaknesses that they have as a team, and the opportunities and threats. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, for everyone who's new to the term. And it allows you to basically map your environment, map your market. There are many other tools like that, Porter's 5 Forces. You can open up an MBA textbook. There'll probably be hundreds of tools. But remember that these tools are, yes, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, like Roshni said. Remember that these are all tools. At the end, don't think of them as deliverables. Your startup is not built when you have a SWOT or when you have a business plan. These are just ways of communicating your ideas and helping you understand your ideas better. At the end of the day, every startup needs to have a solution. So before you start a startup, study your customers, study your market, study your competitors. Definitely study these 3 things, and the more research you do, the better it is. But also draw the line and don't get into analysis paralysis, that you've spent 6 months just studying the market, you haven't built anything. So study, assimilate, use the designer tool of synthesis, which is magic. Designer synthesis is magic. Many people outside of the design world don't understand this, and this is a superpower that you have, that you can synthesize your learnings, basic research, synthesize it, try to build a solution from that, give it to people, see how they interact with it. If you know the 5 steps of design thinking, it's, I think, empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. So make sure you go through this process as often as possible. So define the problem. First, try to empathize with your customers, define that problem as quickly as possible, ideate, prototype, and test. Once you know that you have a solution that works, then you start doing SWOT analysis. Then you say, what are the opportunities for this product? What are the threats? Who are the competitors? How is my product going to work in 10 years from now? So all of those things they come eventually.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I also feel that as a designer, like Abhi said, we definitely have an advantage, and so trust the process, because I feel like the design process is very, very valuable, and neither of us have a background in like business,
Yeah.
right? Like, we don't have an MBA, so we don't really go around throwing these. I feel like sometimes it's a bit restrictive because you throw around a lot of terms and then you just get sucked into trying to figure out, oh, I have this term and I have this framework, how am I going to retrofit it into my process? So most of the time you don't even need it. Like if you understand the process and you understand what you're doing, why you're doing, you're sorted. I mean, that's just speaking from experience. So we don't really use textbook terms and say.
Yeah. Other questions? Cool. Kriti, you know, what we can do is just share what you can, I mean, we can wrap up now. Feel free to reach out to us on Instagram. I shared the link earlier. It is instagram.com Launchspace. I'll just put it again just to cap it. Or you can also connect with us on LinkedIn. Both Roshni and I are on LinkedIn. We're very active. Ask your questions, message us, say that you attended this session, and we'd love to answer any other questions you have. And definitely think about, thanks Shivani, thanks a lot. Definitely think about enrolling in the startup school. If you're free, I know you can't go to college physically, join our cohort. We'll teach you something interesting in a week or a couple of weeks time.
Thanks so much, guys. It was a wonderful session.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Kriti.
So I suppose everyone can get in touch with Abhimanyu and Roshni. And are there any other questions, anything else that anybody would like to ask as an afterthought or anything?
We'd also appreciate detailed feedback. So if you guys have anything that you'd like to share with us, what worked, what didn't, please go ahead and write to us on LinkedIn. Feedback is always appreciated and very, very useful.
Okay.
Just a second. I was trying to get a student to do a vote of thanks for you guys, but I don't know if I think they have an internet issue.
If I can kind of butt in here, I have been hosting webinar. I'm 50 plus webinars now. I think we are kind of doing it on a regular basis, guys. This is the first time that I actually saw somebody engaging the students to this particular level. So thank you very much. It was a lovely session actually. Especially the level with which you kind of engaged. You were the first people who actually saw the chats. In other webinars, it's mostly the host who kind of teaches the question on behalf of the students. But anyway, so the level of connection was great. So, yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I think the student's offline. So on behalf of UID, it gives me immense pleasure to say thank you so much for being here today, for arranging such a lovely, systematic, engaging, interactive session that I'm sure most of my students are, contemplating their futures in. And I think Launchspace itself is definitely destined to go to great heights if this is the level of both commitment, passion, as well as detail with which you guys have conducted today's session. So thank you so much for taking time out. Internet.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Kriti.
Thank you so much, guys. All right, so
thank you very much.
let's connect with you offline then.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you for the questions. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye,
Thank you, ma'am.
you.